Welcome back to the Dopest Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer. This is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about prison and how I ended up there, but I'm going to be talking about addiction today. And I want to talk about, what it feels like and other stuff like that. But first off, what has happened? How have overdoses doubled in the last 5 years when they had the giant crackdown on pills? It's almost impossible for somebody that's actually hurt to get medication that they need because they've had this giant crackdown. They reformulated all the pills for the most part, except for one particular one, which is the big reason. And by reformulation, what that means is it is impossible to snort them. They are like supposed to be solid as could be, and I've heard of people putting them in the oven and baking them to dust and then injecting them. But basically they're tamper-proof, so they're not popular because you're going to be wasting a lot of what you're getting. Addicts will be doing that. So the gold standard for what an addict wants today is a pill called roxicodone 30 milligram. It's basically Oxy 30. It's a small blue pill, and it's the gold standard because it can be snorted, it can be shot, it's not reformulated, and that is what everybody wants because it's the highest one that you can get. So what has happened is during the time that the pill crackdown has happened, the cartels picked up on that was what everybody wanted. That was the hot ticket. That was the hot commodity that there was not enough supply of, but there was a huge demand for. So they set up huge labs to do massive pill pressing of counterfeit Roxy 30. So counterfeit Roxy 30, what is that? Okay, it's meant to look just like the actual pill that you would get from the pharmacy, but there's no it's no oxycodone in it. It's a little bit of fentanyl, just a tiny little touch, because that's all it takes, and then the rest is just a buffer to make it look like the pill, to make it appear as if it's the pill that you would get from a pharmacy, the legitimate pill. Now, here's the issue with that. Fentanyl is too powerful. It is so powerful that unless you have a lab that has checks and balances way beyond what you could ever imagine, it's impossible to make sure each one has the appropriate dose. Generally, 1 in 5 of these counterfeit pills is higher dosed, higher dosed than the rest. So, usually it's not a big deal, because even if you get a higher dose one, addicts don't do just one. They start with one, but they'll build up a tolerance. Why do one when 2 is better, and why do 2 when 3 is great? That's how it works. So a lot of the time, if you just do 1 or 2 at a time, you have a 1 in 5 chance of getting a higher dose one. If you get a higher dose one and a regular dose one, not an issue. But by statistics, by basic math, at some point, if you're doing 2 at a time, you are going to get 2 of the pills that are higher dosed. And it's unintentionally higher dosed, but when that happens, what you can ultimately end up doing is doing 4 times the amount of, drugs that you think that you're doing. And that is what is happening. That is what has really... They are the most profitable drug that is smuggled across the border right now. How are they the most profitable drug? Okay, the other drugs cost so much to produce, like cocaine costs like $2,000 a kilo in Colombia, then ends up being like $7,000 in Mexico, and then once it gets here, nowadays, I'm not going to argue with people on here, but place to place it varies. Anywhere from, down in like Texas for in the 20,000s up as high as 40,000 up northeast. So, those take so much to make and everything else, but the fentanyl is cheap to make, and it's cheap to press these pills. 4 cents a pill, and when it gets over here, it's sold as high as $20 and even $30 at a retail value. It's wholesale for less than that in bulk, but it's a huge money maker. It's a huge money maker that is making people lots of money, and the greed is what is fueling this. But it's what's taking everybody out because it is too powerful. Heroin takes roughly about 50 milligrams of raw pure heroin to take somebody out that has a little lower tolerance. If it's snorted, if it's shot, it could be even less than that. But 50 milligrams, that's pretty easy. It's a pretty reasonable amount. It's a 1/20 of a gram. It's enough that you can see. Now, fentanyl only takes 1 to 2 milligrams to take somebody out. to take their life. So it's literally 50 to 100 times more powerful than it. Now, I used to cut drugs. So what that means is I would get the raw drugs and I would push it through screens. There was this stuff called bubble hash. It was a thing that you took weed and you made it into hash with. It was a screen that was so fine you couldn't fit a hair through it. And that's what we put all the cut and all the dope through. Because if you were to take flour and, let's say, sugar, they're two different grains. You know, the flour's real fine, the sugar's gritty. If you shook them up in a cup, you could see the grit, see them separate. If you don't put it all through a screen like that, it's not going to be the same consistency, and it's not going to be an even mixture. Some's going to be better, some's going to be worse. Some people are going to be too happy, and some people are going to complain too much. Now, ultimately, what would happen over hours and hours of pushing, so much dope through these screens and then bagging them up with a little tiny scoop that had just enough that was pretty much pre-measured, one at a time, there would be tiny holes in the screen. Not big at all, not big, just this big. All it takes to take somebody out, take somebody's life, is a grain of salt-sized piece of fentanyl that can take somebody's life. And these tiny tears in the screen occur when you push massive amounts through it. And not everybody's using a fine screen. A lot of people are using the cheap screen, just whatever they got laying around. You got Bobo in his basement cutting stuff up to make a higher profit, and the 5th grade education, and it doesn't care about your life. And he's mixing your stuff up sometimes. Sometimes it's over here it's mixed up, and people do it over here too. It happens over there, happens over here. It's even worse over here. At least over there, they got a little bit more money behind it, so it can be a little bit better quality control, but not a whole lot. So it's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous now because it's too powerful. They've made something that is too potent, something that it's too hard to mass produce a ton of counterfeit pills and have them have even consistency. So basically what happened was during the reformulation and the crackdown, and everybody we took down Purdue Pharma for getting everybody hooked on Oxy, and they did get a lot of people hooked on it. They absolutely did. But by doing this massive crackdown and making it impossible for even people who need it to get their own pills, they have created a bigger problem. By doing that, they've opened the floodgates. It's sort of similar to Saddam Hussein being taken down to power. Yeah, Saddam Hussein sucked. Nobody likes him. He's a dick. And, needed to be taken out. But when he was around, you didn't have Taliban, you didn't have ISIS running around. Once he was taken out, it let the inmates run the asylum. Okay? And that's basically the same situation here. You took one thing away that was bad, and you opened the floodgates for something much, much worse to happen. Not only that, but there are a lot of people that do need these medications that can't get them because it's so tamper-proof, and they try to blame this, blame that, instead of everybody has to blame somebody. It can never be, looked at objectively. It has to be made into a media spectacle. And that's the thing with addiction. What makes somebody an addict? A lot of the times, something that I have noticed personally, in my personal case, is a lot of times people who are addicts have dual diagnosis problems. Me personally, I have severe anxiety, and I have obsessive compulsive disorder and ADD. So my whole life, I never felt normal inside my own skin, inside my own brain. I felt like just off, different than what I felt like everybody else should feel like. And, I passed out in the 5th grade because I thought I forgot a homework assignment. When I woke up, I refused to leave until I found the assignment and turned it in. I went the whole year without getting a demerit. The first person who was closest to me had like 8 or 9 demerits that year. The last day of school, the teacher gave me one just to prove nobody was perfect. It was BS. But anyway, having these issues, when I tried drugs for the first time, they make certain chemicals in my brain change, dopamine, serotonin, to where I feel normal. For the first time in my life, I feel normal. Okay? If you have felt like you're not normal for your entire life, then you try something that makes you finally feel like you're normal. Of course, you're going to like it. You're going to love it. Okay? When people sell drugs, they're not really selling a drug, they're selling a feeling. They're selling a feeling, and each one has a different feeling, but the basic one is, it makes you feel like everything's going to be all right and everything is happy. And that's what people are buying. People, and a lot of people that have issues, a lot of people don't even know they have these issues. end up walking away. If 5 people sit down on the table, try a drug, walk away, one will have something different chemically happen inside their head. It's just going to happen, And punishing these people that have mental illnesses that found drugs and become addicted because they don't feel comfortable inside their own skin is not doing anything. The majority of people in prison that I've seen, drug dealers are middlemen. See, people look at drug dealers as bad people, but most of the drug dealers that are in prison actually had higher morals than the other people, and I can explain that, okay? So when people get on drugs, they end up using up all their money. They end up having to steal, lie, scheme, scam to their own family, and some people don't like that. I didn't like that. So rather than do that, lie to my family, steal from my family, I thought, well, I'll just sell drugs to the people who use drugs. I'll middleman it. So a lot of time, I took it a little bit overboard. I went a little bit higher up the chain than that, but the typical person, to make a few bucks, will say, it's just like retail. If you buy one bottle, it's going to cost something, but if you buy a 12-pack, it's going to be cheap. So with heroin, for instance, typically what it is like one bag. This was way back. Of course, in Big City, it's way different than this, and I'm sure it's way different than this now. I'm out of games. I have no clue. But this is just for reference. $20 for one bag, okay? But if you buy 10, you can get it for $150, okay? $50 price cut. So if I tell, Johnny over here, he wants 3 bags for $60, and then, Susie over here wants 5 bags for $100. I make myself $10, and I make 2 bags to do that. So then I collect their money. I go to my connection, in which they do not have. That's typically what a middleman is. It's somebody who has a connection that the other people don't have. So they give them the money. They go to the dealer. They get it. They bring it back to them. That is the most typical thing that happens. There is not an addict that I've met that I can ever remember that has not middlemanned dozens of deals, okay? And sometimes people get caught doing it, and a lot of the time the reason they do it is because they don't want to scheme, scam, or steal. They're not bad people. They're actually the people who are not wanting to do bad stuff. They're not wanting to hurt their family. They figure, well, they're addicts too, I'll just keep it in that life. That's what they're thinking. And these people get put in cages, and a lot of the times the addicts that get caught, put in prison, that have mental health issues, get put in there. The mental health issues don't get treated, and it just makes them worse. It gives them more issues. That's what happened to me. I'm complete insomniac now. I have PTSD dreams, just from stuff that I've seen. I was walking around the track one time, and 10 foot away from me, I saw somebody who was my friend get poked up with knives by 3 people, just randomly. Made eye contact with them. I had to keep walking, because if I got involved, they'd be me next. Sometimes it's your biggest thing in prison is making making yourself get through without getting in trouble, getting hurt, getting more time, and getting back to your family. As much as people can become friends in there, that is your main goal, and anything but that goal is a selfish thing to your family, because you owe it to your family to get back out there and give it another shot. But being in prison, seeing stuff like that, can mess people up, and then all the things that happen in there. And these simple things, non-narcotic medicines through doctors, through psychologists, psychiatrists are the ones that prescribe it, for certain simple issues, okay? I'm an insomniac. I take a medicine called Seroquel to fall asleep. I take one called Prazosin, that's for dreams, for nightmares. And then I take melatonin gummies, and I still wake up with panic attack dreams, and I'm wide awake. I'm like having my heart go fast, I'm all sweaty. And I take a quarter of a gabapentin each time I wake up. Typically, it's what I do. I take a gabapentin, a quarter of one, every time I wake up. It's a non-narcotic medicine. It's given for anxiety. It's also given for neuropathy, but it's an incredible medication that served me very well. I can't take it during the day. It makes me feel stupid. It makes me feel slow. And I train martial arts. When I spar, if I take one of those like during the daytime, then I go spar, I'm going to get beat up because it makes me slow. But it slows everything down. And when I take it in the night, it still got a sort of effect that carries throughout the day, but at a lesser degree. And that's what works for me. No person is going to be the same. So it takes time and patience and open dialogue with a psychiatrist to figure out what your issues are if you do have mental health issues. And if they would just get addicts some help with one of these, if they put psychiatrists in prison that really worked with people, or just, made an alternative, that they went to this a program of some sort that actually had real treatment, not the BS they have. The behavioral modification treatment they have in prison is a joke. It's meant for people that weren't raised right. I was raised completely right, have manners, and I just chose to, after I got hooked on it, I chose to deal because, wouldn't have to lie, steal, scam, scheme, whatever. So, but if they had psychiatrists, psychologists that worked with people, found what medicines that they need that would work for each individual, that person could feel normal. And if you feel normal, if you don't feel like you're uncomfortable in your own skin, like you are just, stuff just does not set right the same way chemically as other people, it could all be much simpler. It could be a lot simpler. Certain people, it just not wired the same way, and it's something they have to accept, And it's some people act like, it's a thing of willpower or something like that. Okay, for my jiu-jitsu competition, my last one, I was training 5 hours a day, twice a day, studying obsessively when I was at home. I'm obsessive compulsive, got willpower, okay? But with this, it's different. I can't do one, because what happens with an addict is it's a disease of obsession and a compulsion. The obsession is the thinking about it. After you tried it the first time, you think about it every second until you can get it again. And then the compulsion is the actual act of going out to go get the drugs. When you go out to go get the drugs and you use the drugs, that's the compulsion part. Or if you go, the compulsion can also be when you go to steal, when you go to lie, scheme, scam, steal, that's the compulsion part too. The compulsion so you can get it. The obsession is what every addict deals with. The compulsion is the part that determines whether you're actually going to use or not. And when you break it down like that, it makes a little bit more sense. There's a lot of stuff that people just, it's been made into this, you're bad if you do drugs, or anything like that. If you just looked at it as a mental health issue and it was treated as one, it could, I think a whole lot more could get done. I think a whole lot more could get done with it. That's my personal opinion on it. Some of the best people I know are addicts. Some of the most creative people I know are addicts. In order to supply, $200-$300 a day habit, you look at some of these addicts and how they're able to find a way to somehow supply these ridiculous habits, and they're homeless, and they can still come up with $300 a day to do drugs. I mean, it's a pretty creative person. I mean, you have to give that to them. But it's something that feels looked at the wrong way, and if it was spoken a little bit more openly and less taboo and not as a shameful thing, it could be helped. A lot of people could be helped. And there's certain individuals that I've worked with talking with this stuff, and the last one personally sucks. He's back in jail now. You can't fix people. People got to want themselves. But whenever I was speaking to him and his mom's like, "Oh, so your mom told you about our story already?" I said, "No, she's never actually mentioned you ever in my life. She swore and she couldn't believe it." And she's like, "Well, then how do you know this?" I said, "Your story's not unique." I said, "It's, there's different circumstances, but the story of most addicts is generally the same." So I was literally telling her how he felt, and I was literally telling him how she felt, and it was exactly dead on. Because a lot of people think they can get angry at addiction and get so angry and get so mad at them to shame them. And shame is the worst thing. Shame is the number one thing that'll send an addict back to using. That's the worst thing you could do. You can't yell at it to make it better. That's not a thing. Of course, there are reward consequences that you can put in place that do help. Not saying that, but yelling at it, you can't do that. You can't say, "You love the drugs more than me." I mean, it's something that you can't explain. And every person that I've seen just about that walks around right now in the world has an addiction to something. I have family members that, are addicted, have some that are alcoholics. completely. But because it's legal, they think, well, that's not so bad. I'm not like that. And, one of them waited till they were like 60 years old, and now every day, all day, just drinks. All they do. Some people, it can be cigarettes. Some people, it can be caffeine. Some people, it can be some type of food. It can be, if you were to tell somebody, most people right now, you got to quit any and all processed sugar completely. They would not be able to do it. And there's been studies that show that processed sugar withdrawal, there's a withdrawal from processed sugar if you cut it out completely, is similar to heroin withdrawal. It's very similar. The legal things, of course, people who get addicted to those like alcohol, that's much harder because it's everywhere. Any gas station you go in, you're going to see it. But it's just some of my thoughts on it right now. I figured I'd run this by. I'm going to do more individual videos that have one theme I'm going to stick to, but that was just kind of a brief overview. I'm going to start doing more of these. I'm going to tell my stories anyway, so y'all who've been here watch for my stories, I'm still going to tell them. But these will be additional videos, like a 2 in a day type deal. So, it's something, I've helped a few people. I've tried to help a bunch of people, but you gotta help yourself, and that's something that's hard for me too. It's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for a lot of acts to try to help people, seeing you do all you can and they still end up back into it. The bad has to outweigh the good, because if you talk to 90% of addicts that are in jail, rehab, wherever, they'll have stories to tell you how much they did this one time, or this one time that was awesome. And until they get to the point where, when you ask them, tell me about your addiction, tell me about some of the times you had, and they quit telling the good times and they start telling you the bad times, when the bad outweighs the good, to where when they ask you about it, your stomach gets sick, not because you want to use, but because you're sick about everything that's happened in your life. So many bad things have happened, you realize, maybe this isn't working. Maybe I need to try something else. And that time comes, and that's like what they call a moment of clarity in NA and AA programs. You have a moment where stuff makes sense, and you're like, okay, it's not working, it's not manageable. And also, in my personal opinion, people that go to methadone clinics, Suboxone clinics, and they follow it down to a T, their dosage, I don't consider them in active addiction. Active addiction, I consider people who are doing things that are causing problems with personal relationships, problems with the law, and that type of thing. If somebody's legally getting a medication, and taking it as prescribed, and they're not nodding out on it, if they're a higher dose than they should be, of course, that is. But if they're taking what keeps them stable and allows them to be stable, they need to stay on that as long as they need to, until they decide, not you, not anybody else, till they decide, okay, maybe it's time to give it a try to take it down. And when that time comes, to not be scared to tell the doctor, should it happen, that I wasn't ready, this is too much, because I've seen so many people that be steady on Suboxone or methadone, and they'll be stable on it, doing perfect for 2-3 years, but then they start detoxing. And rather than go to their doctor and say, look, I need to go back up, this isn't working, I need to up my dose back up, I'm not ready to do this yet, they have too much shame to admit it, so they'll go back out and use. I've seen that so many times, I cannot even tell you, and it's sad. That's the time you see people relapse. The two most dangerous times, I would say, for somebody to possibly overdose accidentally are when they are released from jail or prison or rehab. The reason for that, their tolerance is gone. So they've been in jail for prison for any amount of time over a month, or and they get back out and they figure, well, I was doing 2 at a time back then, I'll do 2 at a time now. Or I was doing 4 at a time back then, I'll do 3 at a time now. Their tolerance has drastically decreased. So when they do that, when they first get out, that is the most dangerous time. That's when you got to watch somebody more than anything. The most recent person I've had die, and I've had 44 people die under the age of 35 that were my personal friends, not people that were acquaintances. Oh, I met them once and they died. I'm not saying that. If I were to do that, it would be a lot more. But actual people that I could tell you their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, I could tell you stories of childhood, all from my area, that have passed away from drugs or drug-related violence. I would say a quarter or better of them died after getting out of jail or rehab and going back and trying to use, and their tolerance wasn't there, so their body didn't hold up behind it. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you have somebody that's fresh out of there, you're going to be annoying to them by being up their butt watching them all the time. It's a necessary evil, and it's going to suck for them, but it's dangerous. It's dangerous when people, especially today, it's not the same as it used to be. Back when I was coming up, the only type of fentanyl you saw were the patches that came from a pharmacy, and they called them morphine patches. They didn't even call them fentanyl. They were around, but it was like 1 milligram spread out throughout a whole patch that was made of gel. Now it's reduced to its purest form, which is so dangerous, and I can't begin to explain that. But people wonder, how that happens, and that's the biggest thing, or the counterfeit 30s. That's what's really, and I mean they're putting in other stuff too, but that's the main thing. So anyway, if you like the video, press the like button. It's something I'm going to be doing some more of. Got people that I talk to personally around my way that instead of just saying this over and over before I talk to them, I can have them watch a few of these videos, and then after they watch them, then they can ask me more questions, and I feel like that'll make a whole lot more sense and save some time and actually put us ahead of schedule on figuring stuff out. So, it's not impossible. Nobody's beyond repair. I went to rehab probably a dozen times, and usually it was to avoid getting caught by law enforcement. Whenever it get hot around, I'd go to rehab. That way, if they did get me, I'd say, well, I went to rehab. That was my thinking back then. It took me a long time. I was deemed infixable, incurable, that one of the hopeless ones. It even says that in like the AA or NA handbook, that some people are hopeless and unable to. It's wrong. It's not true. It's not right. They shouldn't even have it in there. And yeah, that's wrong. When they wrote that, they're wrong. Anybody can do it. There is nobody that's beyond repair. There's nobody that's incurable. There's nobody that can't one day figure it out. If you are still breathing, you can figure it out. So, and if you have somebody that's going through it, they can figure it out. It sucks. Sometimes you gotta go to jail, gotta go to prison. That's just how it is nowadays. If they had something better, it would probably help a whole lot more. But a lot of time when people do go, it gives them at least a little bit of time. It's not as available at the same price, so they can't do it every day. So it's let you sit there and think about, man, I'm sitting in here, this sucks, this ain't quite working out. So anyway, if you like the video, press the like button. I'll be doing more of these, but it won't take away from my normal everyday videos. I'm going to keep on doing that too. This is just going to be an additional thing that will maybe hit the ears of somebody that needs to hear it somewhere else in the world, and some people that I talk to and deal with in my area can watch before they talk to me. So y'all have a good one.